June 4, 1943. Railroad Street, Mexia, Texas. The pencil shook just slightly in the hand of a German soldier who had learned to keep his thoughts hidden. Unificio Werner Burkhardt leaned against the window of the train, watching the night roll past, and wrote in a diary he knew could ruin him if discovered. For 3 years, Nazi propaganda had told him America was decadent, collapsing, weakened by luxury and internal division. Yet outside that window, stretching across the Texas plains, he saw something that made his indoctrination crumble in real time. Electric lights burned everywhere. Farmhouses, street corners, shops. An ocean of illumination at 10 o'clock at night. In Germany, the Reich had lived under blackout regulations since 1940. Even before the war, most rural farms had never known electricity. And yet here, in a land described as exhausted and dying, power flowed endlessly. Burkhardt wrote what he dared not speak aloud: the Americans must be lying to us. No nation fighting on 2 fronts could possibly live like this. The train slowed, and 1,850 veterans of the Afrika Korps stepped onto the platform. Not from cattle cars or freight wagons, but from cushioned Pullman coaches with sleeping berths and dining service. The entire town of Mahia had gathered to watch. Families stood quietly as the prisoners disembarked, expecting hatred, perhaps fear. Instead, there was only curiosity. None of the men arriving understood that this moment marked the beginning of the most devastating psychological defeat the Nazi ideology would ever suffer. The war would not be lost in battle plans or firefights alone. It would be lost in factories, farms, power plants, and rail yards, places the German soldiers were about to see with their own eyes. Only weeks earlier, in May 1943, the illusion of German invincibility had collapsed in Tunisia. More than 250,000 German and Italian troops surrendered after the Afrika Korps was encircled. These were not conscripts or second-rate units. They were veterans hardened by desert warfare, men who had pushed the British back to Egypt and earned the respect of their enemies. Among them was Headman Friedrich Radke, an Iron Cross holder wounded twice in North Africa. Decades later, his diary would become one of the most revealing documents historians ever uncovered. It chronicled not just defeat, but awakening. That awakening began in Algeria, where tens of thousands of prisoners waited in temporary camps for transport. Even there, American efficiency chipped away at German assumptions. Prisoners were processed with astonishing speed. Identity cards photographed. Medical exams completed. Vaccinations administered. Their rights explained clearly in fluent German by American officers trained for this exact task. The food shocked them most. White bread. Real coffee. Meat served regularly. Prisoners assumed it was propaganda, a temporary display meant to deceive. They didn't yet understand this was simply how Americans fed their soldiers. The ships that carried them across the Atlantic were themselves revelations. Liberty ships, plain, utilitarian cargo vessels, were being produced at a rate the Germans would have considered fantasy. One had been built in just over 4 days. By summer 1943, these ships were transporting up to 30,000 prisoners a month back to the United States after delivering supplies to Europe. During the crossing, German soldiers watched American sailors throw away food without hesitation. Half-eaten steaks. Whole loaves of bread. Milk discarded because it sat too long. Not mockery. Not cruelty. Indifference born of abundance. One German officer wrote that the waste from a single day aboard ship exceeded what his entire company had received in a week during the final months in Africa. As the ships neared the American coast, another illusion shattered. Radar rotated atop cargo vessels, technology German officers believed was rare and secret. It was standard here. Lieutenant Colonel Wilhelm von Stobern, from a Prussian family steeped in military tradition, later wrote that watching that antenna spin was the moment he knew Germany had already lost. Not tactically, industrially. When the prisoners arrived at Norfolk Naval Base in August 1943, the scale of what they saw defied comprehension. The base stretched for miles. Dozens of ships were loaded and unloaded simultaneously. In a single day, the port handled more cargo than Hamburg managed in a week. Cranes moved silently on electric power, lifting loads that would have required teams of men and horses in Germany. Along the road stood parking lots packed with civilian automobiles owned by dockworkers. In Germany, private car ownership was a dream sold by propaganda. Here it was ordinary. Then came the trains. Not boxcars. Not 40-and-8 wagons. Full passenger coaches. Padded seats. Dining cars with white tablecloths. Observation cars with wide windows. Air conditioning. One American sergeant even apologized when it malfunctioned. Radke wrote that they boarded like tourists, not prisoners. During the journey inland, the true destruction of Nazi mythology began. Every town they passed glowed at night. Not cities, towns. Small communities with illuminated streets, factories running night shifts, shops open late. Prisoners argued among themselves, insisting it had to be staged. But the towns never ended. One engineer calculated that a single rail yard used more electricity in an hour than his Berlin district consumed in a day. Lights burned in empty rooms. Fans ran without occupants. It was waste so casual it felt obscene to men shaped by scarcity. As the trains crossed Tennessee and Kentucky, massive factories rolled past the windows. Aluminum plants consuming more electricity than entire German cities. Synthetic rubber complexes producing quantities Germany could only dream of. Outside Detroit, the Willow Run plant rose like a city unto itself, assembling a bomber every hour. Prisoners watched aircraft in various stages of completion and realized these were not inferior machines rushed into service. They were precise, standardized, and produced faster than Germany could comprehend. The deeper they traveled, the clearer the truth became. Along the Mississippi, barges carried grain in volumes larger than Germany's entire annual harvest. In Kansas City, stockyards held tens of thousands of cattle. Prisoners watched American workers eat beef sandwiches during lunch, meat consumed casually, without ceremony. Guards bought hamburgers for prisoners with spare change. This wasn't generosity. It was normal. The camps themselves delivered the next shock. Barracks with electricity. Hot showers. Steam heat. Hospitals better equipped than German civilian facilities. Penicillin used freely, even on prisoners. German doctors stood stunned as wounded enemy soldiers received care unavailable to German troops at home. Kitchens discarded surplus food daily because regulations required excess to ensure full rations. One former chef wrote that he cried throwing away bread his family hadn't seen in years. When prisoners were sent to work in American fields and factories, the final illusions collapsed. They traveled openly through the countryside, seeing endless farms powered by electricity, machines replacing entire villages of labor. A single combine did the work of 100 men. Farmers spoke casually of yields double those in Germany. Workers owned cars, radios, refrigerators. Even teenagers drove tractors worth more than a German family's lifetime earnings. In factories, prisoners witnessed automation on a scale unknown in Europe. Soup plants processing more food in a day than German facilities managed in a month. Power plants consuming more electricity than entire German regions. Industrial complexes employing tens of thousands, running non-stop, staffed by women, minorities, and elderly workers, groups Nazi ideology deemed weak or inferior. Yet production never slowed. By winter 1943, American intelligence officers noticed something unprecedented. The prisoners stopped arguing. Fanatical Nazis grew quiet. Camp newspapers shifted tone. Soldiers once devoted to Hitler began asking about democracy, economics, and life after the war. Christmas that year broke the final barrier. 500,000 care packages arrived from American civilians. Churches sang carols in German. Families sent cookies to enemy soldiers. Prisoners ate a feast identical to what American families enjoyed at home. They were stunned not by the food alone, but by the intent. This wasn't propaganda. It was confidence. As the war progressed, prisoners watched America mobilize at full power. Higgins boats rolled off assembly lines by the hundreds. Steel plants produced more in a day than Germany at its peak. Harvests fed continents. Food was destroyed to stabilize prices, an idea so foreign it caused emotional breakdowns among men from a starving Europe. When news of D-Day reached the camps, there was no denial left. The scale of the invasion was beyond fantasy. Thousands of ships. Endless aircraft. Supply chains that crossed oceans. The war was not just lost. The ideology behind it was exposed as a lie built on ignorance. The final blow came when footage of concentration camps was shown. At first, prisoners refused to believe it. Then letters arrived. Evidence mounted. Pride collapsed into shame. Men who had clung to honor realized they had served criminals. American guards did not mock them. They offered counseling, education, preparation for rebuilding. By 1945, tens of thousands of prisoners were enrolled in courses on democracy, engineering, agriculture, and governance. They returned to Germany not as conquerors, but as witnesses. Many would help rebuild a nation from rubble, carrying lessons learned not from propaganda, but from observation. They had come expecting weakness. They found abundance. They had come as enemies. They left transformed. The greatest American victory of the war was not just won on beaches or battlefields, but quietly, in prison camps, where the overwhelming evidence of a free society dismantled tyranny without firing a shot. That was the true arsenal of democracy, not just weapons, but the power to change minds through reality itself.